So the first talk, we have Ursula Ellenberg and Thomas Mattern studying the secret life of Fiordland penguins.
Sorry, I couldn't remember the title that we proposed for a talk, so it's a bit different from what you just heard from Simon. But we had to use this phrase because to kick it all off, we have to show you this. This is stuff that was recently released on Netflix in our Planet 2 series.
It's shy and mysterious. Fiordland's Tawaki penguin, the jungle penguin.
And it just shows Tawaki the way they really are, really mysterious and difficult to spot, really. So it was a real challenge for these guys to get this footage filmed. So why study Tawaki? Well, first of all, they're pretty cool birds. They're really nice to look at, but there's more to that story. And to give you a bit of context, we've got 4 crested penguin species in New Zealand, and 3 of them, Tawaki, snares, and the erect crested penguins, are endemic. So they only exist in New Zealand, so they're our responsibility. So are rockhopper penguins, but we also got a few in the Australian and French territories of the subantarctic. So just to give you an idea where these 4 species are, this is Te Anau, and if we zoom out, we've got the New Zealand subantarctic area here in the view, and we'll start off with just highlighting all the subantarctic islands that we have from the Aucklands, Campbells, Bounties, and Antipodes. And Tawaki are the only ones that are breeding on the New Zealand mainland, along the Fiordland coast, on Solander Island, in the Favo Strait, and on Rakiura. Snares only occurs on the tiny Snares Islands, just pretty close to the Tawaki breeding range. Rockhopper penguins from the Auckland, Campbell to Antipodes, with a stronghold of that species on the Campbells. And then we've got the erect crested on the Bounties and Antipodes. And what these birds, particularly these subantarctic species, have in common, they're all in decline, in massive decline. Rockhopper penguins are assumed to have declined by about 90% since the 1950s. Erect crested penguins up to 75%. So they're all going down. And the same has always been presumed for Tawaki, but to be quite honest, that wasn't based on any actual data. What we knew, though, was that the Snares penguins are the only one of the 4 that are stable. So why are they going down? Well, we live in a warming world, and this graph just exemplifies that starting in the middle of the last century, everything started to gradually warm up, and that also applies to our ocean temperatures. So the heat is going up, and that has an effect on the productivity in the ocean and the environment that the penguins need to survive. So that's why we see these declines, particularly in the subantarctic species. But why on earth are the Snares penguins stable when Tawaki are going down? So this is the question we try to address. And actually there are 2 questions tied to that. Why are Tawaki declining while the Snares penguins are doing okay? You know, they're next door neighbors. So if it's something in the ocean, wouldn't that affect Snares penguins as well? So that leads to the next question. Are Tawaki declining? Because as I said, they were one of the least studied penguin species on this planet. And what we knew in Tawaki before the Tawaki project started is sort of exemplified by this graph. So these are scientific publications that have been released until then. You can see all the New Zealand penguins are way down at the bottom because nobody is researching these birds, because it's very expensive to do, logistically quite challenging. So when we start with the Tawaki project, that's basically what we knew about Tawaki, what they look like and roughly where they live. We also had sort of an idea or tried to get an idea about how many there were. So how many penguins were there? Well, this is the website, the Red List, which lists the threat ranking of species. And in 2014, Fiordland penguin, Tawaki, were rated as vulnerable with a population of 2,500 to around 10,000 birds. That's not a lot. But it was basically based on very, very incomplete data and a lot of guesswork. So this is where the Tawaki project came in, because we wanted to figure out what's going on with these birds, especially since they're on the mainland, so they should be accessible. We had two approaches. On one hand, we were interested in the marine ecology. What do they do when they're out at sea? How deep do they dive? What do they eat? And whether this ocean warming has an effect on them. And the other thing is, what are they doing in terms of numbers? What is affecting their population? Where do they breed? How many are there? Do we ever find out? And where are they going in terms of their population side? And is there anything we can do about it? So we started off with the marine ecology because that's where we were engaged with this kind of research during our PhD. We work with snares penguins, and so we had that background. And if something is going on with penguins, it's quite often something out at sea. So this is the breeding range of Tawaki split up in three different breeding sectors: the West Coast, Fiordland, and the Southern Islands. And this is split up purely because of the marine environment that they inhabit. Because you can see at the West Coast up there, we've got some continental shelf. In Fiordland, we've got fjords, which is a completely different environment. And then as soon as you leave the fjord, you're almost in the open ocean because there's hardly any shelf to speak of. In the Southern Islands, it's just like a wading pool, really. So three different marine environments. So when we start with the Tawaki project and the marine ecology side of things, we wanted to check, to compare the behavior of the birds in those three different sectors. So we studied at Jackson Head, Milford Sound, Pupuatawi, and then Whenua-Hou down off Rakiura. And the results were quite interesting because they were all over the map. It was literally all over the map. The birds did not adhere to one specific behavior. It depended on where they were, and they would always confuse us. If we look at the West Coast, these birds were raising chicks. They were traveling up to 80 kilometers away from the coast to find food. And when we then compare that to Milford Sound, the guys from Harrison Cove hardly ever left the fjord, so they stayed within 2 to 3 kilometers of their nest site. So a massive difference to Jackson Head. And down on Whenua-Hou, it was a bit of a mix. It looks like a grandiose graph we have there, but it's only like 40 kilometers, the longest trip. They did, long foraging trips as well as the short ones. So for us, after 5 years of doing this, we realized, okay, if they can find enough food that close in shore, Fiordland is probably a really good habitat for them. And why is that? But then we asked the question, okay, if birds are breeding right in the entrance of the fjord, do they actually go into the fjord or do they leave? And ocean warming, is it a problem for them? So that's when we entered the second phase of the Tawaki project that we're in right now. And we continued and expanded our work to different sites. Milford Sound, Doubtful Sound, and Dusky Sound at the moment. And this is my cue to hand over the microphone.
That is beyond the reflection. Is that really the right way around? And you find a lot of stuff published. What I want to share with you today is what's not yet published and what's really exciting, because people make or break a project, and we've been really blessed having a lot of really cool people on board that made this project a success. So we kicked off in 2020 with the Tawaki girls in Fiordland and Milford Sound, and we couldn't have done anything without the huge support by initially Southern Discoveries, and namely Andrea Fares, who is in the audience, because without you wouldn't be standing here. Thank you, Andrea. She's now a founding member of the Tawaki Trust as well. And Holly Langley, who is now the new manager of the Milford Deep, or the Discovery Center in Milford Sound. And they've supported us, getting us into the field on occasion with ridiculous amounts of gear. And then COVID hit, as you all know. And despite all this, and we're doing a lot of things on kayaks, we managed to get a lot of good data on Tawaki foraging ecology, comparing inner and outer fjord colonies, and deployed the first Pingu camps on this cooperative lady. And with a bit of time, you'll see some underwater footage of various Pingu camps at the end of this talk. But I want to introduce you the main players here, and this is Myron Otis, who did her master's with us. And she's currently working for DOG, managing a Kakariki translocation up north. But in her night time, she managed to pull that paper together. So that's about to get out. And here's Jeff White, PhD student, currently writing up, great guy in the field, Blake came on board as our next Tawaki project masters and brought Roscoe's Milford kayaks with him. So thank you, Roscoe. And he's still, we found quite similar results here, Tawaki, in the fjords, focusing on this really big fjord ecosystem, whereas the coastal Tawaki behave more like we would expect a pelagic forager behave like. And you're still thinking about a catchy title, right? We couldn't do anything down in Fiordland without the support of Abu and Mandy, that many of you know. And we always show these nice sunny photos. I really like this photo of Mandy being all muddy and wet to the bone and still smiling and helping us getting stuff off the ground. That's Fiordland Expedition, and this is a pilot project of Finn we did in Dusky this last season. And this is what you usually expect Fiordland to look like. It's really fine country for the waterproof explorer, and we've been really lucky having a lot of waterproof people on board. And yeah, so this is Finn. He'll be doing his masters in Dusky Sound this coming season. If you see him around, please be nice to him. And luckily, the Tawaki are really waterproof as well. So they are really good at finding these cozy nooks in tree root caves and under rocks where they can shelter and raise chicks to good size. We had a really weird season this last season. So 2 to 3 week late onset of breeding. Quite a few decided to skip the season. But those that decided to breed did so very successfully so, and quite a few even managed to raise 2 chicks last season. But this is a more accessible nest. This is how things usually look. So you've got to be quite friendly with cave spiders if you want to work with us.
So, are Tawaki declining? That's the next question we're trying to address, and that's the population dynamics. So when we started, the estimate for the population in Milford Sound was 9 breeding pairs. And then Andrea contacted me and said, hey, don't you want to work here? And I said, with 9 breeding pairs, no way. But we did it anyway, and we searched, and we found actually that it's more like 130 to 150 breeding pairs. Just in Milford Sound alone. We continue to search other sites like Doubtful Sound, Dusky Sound, and with that input, the numbers on the IUCN website, on the threat ranking website, were revised to now 12,500 to 50,000 Tawaki, and they're no longer rated vulnerable. They're now near threatened, so they improved. Now, the thing is, it has nothing to do with any conservation effort. It was just us counting the birds. So, I mean, it's still good news. But the thing about searching for birds is they're really difficult to find, and it might not be the best way forward to see what the population is doing. And that's why we've got this transponder gate installed in Harrison Cove. So we've got the birds microchipped, and the birds just walk through this gate and get automatically scanned. And this thing operates the whole year through. And is now in operation since 2019. So we've got more and more data, and it tells us about their survival. How often, how frequent do these birds return, and do they return every year? And this gives us a better information about how the population is doing.
Thank you, guys, because we couldn't do it without you, and we really appreciate your support.